Hello everyone, I'm Dawn. Thank you so much for visiting with me today. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, The Cutting Board. We do all kinds of things here. We do true crime content, we do general discussions, DIY, SFX makeup, hauls, reviews, vlogs, food content, and most importantly, at least to me, Disney content. So if any of that is of interest to you, please join me. We'll have a lot of fun here, at least I think. So in this video, we're going to discuss the Hulu documentary series, or docu-series if you want to call it that, Devil in the Family, The Fall of Ruby Franke. I'm not going to be able to insert any clips, but we're just going to discuss it. I'm just going to talk to you about it and my feelings towards it. And if you haven't seen it already, and this is a story that you are interested in, I would definitely go watch it. It's 3 episodes. It's very interesting. It's very good. In my opinion, it's very well done. And it's a fairly quick watch. Watch this instead of that Heather Locklear movie with, I think it's Heather Locklear in it, where she plays Jodie Hildebrandt. I think that's Heather Locklear, Lifetime movie. Don't watch that. Go watch the documentary instead. So let me first give you a brief background. Ruby Franke was a family vlogger on YouTube. She ran the channel 8 Passengers, which is now deleted. She had 6 children and her husband and herself. That's why they called it 8 Passengers. On the channel, she documented the life of her family in Utah and posted about 5 times a week. In June 2020, the channel had around 2.5 million subscribers. The channel started going downhill when some unacceptable and questionable parenting practices were revealed. It was clear these children were, at the very, very least, experiencing exploitation, and they were burnt out from having to do content every day, and also emotional mistreatment. That's at the very least. Now we'll jump into discussing the docuseries. The very first scene, the very first few seconds, it opens with the heartbreaking ring cam footage of Ruby's youngest son going to a neighbor's house for help. It's her youngest son, second youngest child. Now, I don't need to tell you how sad that whole thing was, just seeing this young, emaciated boy. You can see it in his walk. You can hear it in his voice, his movements, that he was just weak. And it's even more sickening to know that it was his own mother that did this to him. She can blame Jodie, and yeah, Jodie has responsibility in this, but as the child's mother, it's her job to protect her children, first and foremost, before anything else. And not only did she fail to do that, she participated in just the most heinous treatment. A mother's job is not to starve, tie down, and kick her children. It is not to call her children possessed and demons. It is not to belittle, berate, and embarrass and humiliate them. That's not a mother's job. A mother's job is to guide, nurture, and care for her children in a way that no one else can. A mother's job is to provide for their children's physical and emotional needs. A mother's job is to teach her children life skills and values, to exist in the real world and serve as a role model and be someone their children can trust and turn to. Ruby Franke was not any of these things to her children. Ever, at any point that I can see, was she ever any of this to any of her children. Sherry, Ruby's oldest daughter, speaks with what seems respect and love for her mother at first, the very first, but by the end of her first sentence, you can tell it's just utter disgust and disdain for her mother. You can tell that she absolutely loves her siblings so much. She loves them very much. And for Sherry, I don't think there's any coming back, at least as far as a relationship with Ruby. There's no forgiveness in Sherry for Ruby, at least none that is apparent to me, at least. And forgiveness does take time, but there is no desire for any further relationship with her mother, and I can appreciate that. So the narrator talks about how Ruby ran 8 Passengers, a family vlogging channel where she gave parenting advice, family advice, and marriage advice. And all of that is gone. All of those things she gave advice on in her life is gone. Her family is gone. Her husband, Kevin, has filed for divorce, and absolutely no one respects her as a parent. Surely no one in their right brain would take parenting advice from her. She said her children were demons. What kind of mother does that? A terrible one, a sick one with a diseased mind. And Kevin Franke, Ruby's estranged husband, speaks and says that the devil knocked and they opened the door. And I feel like he might be speaking of Jody. That's what I feel like at this point. And I understand he probably wants to put the blame on Jody mostly. And Jody has definitely earned a great deal of blame, don't get me wrong. Not only for what she's done to the Franke family, but what she's done to plenty other families in the past. She's literally destroyed families. But Ruby, in my opinion, for what happened to the Franke children and to the Franke family, is the one responsible for it. Ruby's responsible for that. She had this in her. She had this inside her to do these horrible things to her children. It just doesn't get brought out by some woman. There are other people that have worked with Jody who have, since come forward and told about how awful Jody is, but none of them, at least it has not come out, that none of them mistreated their children in the way Jody encouraged Ruby to. But we also know this wasn't new for Jody, because if you've been following this case at all, we've heard her niece Jessie talk about how Jody treated her when she was forced to live with her. And it lines up so well with how Jody and Ruby treated the Franke children. So definitely some of those ideas were planted in Ruby's head by Jody, but Ruby had it in her all along to do these things. The first episode shows a lot of happy moments from the channel, from the 8 Passengers channel. And I think, at least from the children's point of view, it was sincere and real, at least to a point. To Ruby, it was a business. And to Kevin, and I can tell by watching him in the footage, he was not comfortable with being on camera all the time. It wasn't his thing. And having to play perfect husband and perfect father to his perfect little family. But he did it willingly, even though he didn't like it. And he talked about the money rolling in. But it was all at the expense of his children. But they're really just telling the story of how they got from point A to point B. And it's not as much about the mistreatment, because I can't say the A word, of the children. Yet, although I'm sure it was going on to some degree, especially if they didn't feel like being Ruby's trained performing monkeys. Everyone has bad days, and things are not perfect. They're not perfectly happy sunshine every single day. Life just isn't like that. It's unrealistic. Kevin states that for Ruby, it was never about the money. And I do believe that to an extent, whereas I don't think it was only about the money. But I think Ruby may have looked at the money as God's reward for her good works. I think for her it was more about people thinking she was this great mom. And it was about showing the audience what a devout and loving family looks like. And I think that because she did walk away from it when she hooked up with Jody completely, after she joined forces with Jody, she abandoned her channel, all those subscribers. And Kevin said Ruby would confide in him, telling him that she believes she was meant to be an instrument in the hand of God. But I feel pretty confident in saying hurting your children, starving them, tying them down, treating them like things, forcing them out in the sun for hours on end, exploiting and embarrassing them. That's not the work of any God that I've been taught to believe in. Sherry talks about how their entire schedule during the 8 Passengers channel's life was about YouTube. A neighbor spoke and said, Ruby wasn't like super social, that her YouTube channel seemed to be the most important thing to her, more important to her than anything else. And I get it. My little tiny YouTube channel is extremely important to me. But I don't know, I don't think I would, but if I had children other than my son, he's an adult now, so it's a moot point, but if I had minor children, I don't think that I would be exploiting them on YouTube. And people have told me in the past I should have vlogged my son's cancer treatment and what he went through with cancer. I should have recorded that. But first of all, YouTube wasn't really a thing back then. That was like 1999 to about 2004. And sure, I could have vlogged his young childhood because there were still things that happened involving cancer. He continued treatments and doctor visits and things of that nature. And, all that after YouTube became a thing. But I just wouldn't ever feel right about doing that. I think my son was about maybe 15 when I started my YouTube channel. He's 26 now, so that seems right. And I wouldn't have put him in it or shown him anyway, but he expressed to me that he didn't want to be in any of the videos, which was fine. Now he doesn't care. He's fine, whatever. But back then, he didn't want to be part of it in any of the videos, which is, again, totally fine with me. And I'm glad that he said that. I'm glad that he feels or felt comfortable enough to tell me that. And I wasn't going to make him part of it anyway because that seemed weird to me. But back to the show. This isn't about me. I'm sorry. Her children are starting to express that they don't like the constant vlogging. They don't like being recorded constantly, and they just want to live their life as normal as they can. And she berates them, almost, in my opinion, shaming them for not wanting to participate, like it's hurting the family if they don't. Chad talks about how he started to get in trouble in school and how he got suspended, and Ruby wanted to get him in counseling. And then that is when the family is introduced to Jody. That's where she comes in the picture, but not to the extreme she eventually ends up. Her first session with Chad, Ruby was instantly impressed with Jody and how she wasn't falling for Chad's BS. And just judging from what is said in the show, that was the spark that lit the very long detonating cord on the dynamite that would destroy it all for Ruby. This is when they talk about Chad being sent to the Anasazi Wilderness Camp. Chad talks about how his mom was doing everything to fix him, but he also felt like it wasn't for him, but it was for her. And here's how I feel about that as far as Chad is concerned. There was nothing wrong with Chad. There's nothing wrong with him. He was being a normal, moderately rebellious teenager. Oh no. And I believe a part of that, a very, very big part of that, was that he was being forced to participate in these vlogs, to appear in all these videos for the YouTube channel. And he didn't want to do it. It wasn't fun to him. He didn't want to do it anymore. And I stand by, there is nothing wrong with Chad. There was nothing wrong with him. He was normal. He wasn't a problem. Ruby was always the problem. Chad was fine. He was a normal, healthy young man. He didn't need wilderness camp. He didn't need Miss Distortion Jody to come in. And I think if they were so upset about his behavior, maybe think about it and think, you know what, he doesn't like being on camera, he doesn't like doing these vlogs. Let's give him a break from that and then see what happens. Let's see how things turn around. Let's see what we're doing wrong as parents. It's a lot of pressure to put on a kid to expect him to be, again, a performing monkey for you. And then they talk about Chad losing his bedroom, having his bedroom taken away for 7 months and having to sleep on a beanbag chair for those 7 months that he didn't have his bedroom. There is a difference between taking away a child's privileges or taking away a child's toys or Xbox or giving them an earlier curfew, things like that. But you don't take away what they need for basic comfort and survival in life. No, you don't need a bed to survive, but, I don't agree that his bed should have been taken away. I know in the past, people thought that I thought it was okay to sleep in a beanbag. I never actually said that. All I was trying to say was a teenager's back could probably survive it better than some of our older adult backs. I never said it was right to do that. I don't think he should have lost his bed. But we know that she also denied her children food, so she doesn't care about taken away. She doesn't care about taking away their basic needs to survive and thrive in life. And another thing about Chad losing his bedroom, it wasn't about him being uncomfortable. It was about her causing him humiliation. It was a way to humiliate him because what we didn't see on camera was probably way worse than what he told us about. And Kevin speaks about the mean comments that they got from viewers and how he now realizes a lot of that criticism was valid. It took him a time to come to that, but at least he sees it now. At least he has come to that. Sherry and Chad both talk about the beatings, particularly that Chad would get. He's had bloody noses. He got beat so bad one time that Sherry said she helped him clean blood off the walls. How bad do you need to beat your child that he bleeds so much the walls need to be cleaned? That is diabolical. It's not surprising to me that she did that, but that doesn't make it any less disturbing. And Kevin, they didn't say Kevin did it. They said Ruby did it. It wasn't Kevin. But it was disturbing and distressing to hear, even though it wasn't surprising. But I hope that Chad has been able to get past that and understand now that he was not the problem. There wasn't anything wrong with him. He didn't need to be fixed. I hope he understands he wasn't broken. There was nothing to fix. Sherry says, looking back, that she doesn't think Ruby was a very good person. And she was already a violent parent, which obviously, but when you look at it through a child's eyes, it can take them some time to see the wrong in a parent. It really can. And, Sherry doesn't blame Jody for how far Ruby went. She just brought out more of the darkness and evil that was already present inside of Ruby. In the second episode, they talk more about the 8 passengers cancellation, like the end of them because of Chad losing his bed. That was the jumping off point. They hired a lawyer, and the lawyer advised that they should do an apology, and Ruby was not on board with that at all. Of course she wasn't, because she's always right and she's a nasty person. Because if there is a devil, that's what was working inside her. I just believe that some people are bad, and she's one of them. She is one of them. Chad said she sold her soul, and he's right. In the beginning, with forcing her kids to make content, to vlog continuously, you'd think she sold her soul for money and fame from her YouTube channel. No. She sold her soul for something that she thought was righteous and the epitome of godliness. I don't know if she really thought that or if that's what she was just trying to put out there. When what she did was give in to absolute evil. She took pleasure in harming her children. You can tell by the grin on her face. She always has that stupid smirk on her face when she talks about punishing them. In this part of the series, we are introduced to Jody. Kevin makes a statement about connections, saying that he turned to Ruby when he was first dragged to a meeting and said that it feels like a man-hating club. And I have to agree with him. I really do have to agree with that. It seems like a man-hating club for sure. A man-hating cult. I kind of feel like maybe Jody's husband dumped her for someone maybe younger and prettier and nicer and better, and it just burned a hole in her and lit a fire under her butt to be this kind of evil cult leader. It was already inside of her too, but she needed that button pushed. She preyed on women and used them to first turn against the man in their life. That's what I get out of it. Turn against the men in your life. They're evil. They're bad. I mean, that's what happened with Kevin. Ruby put him out. He had to go. He had to move out and lose contact with his kids. You got to go, dude. He could have demanded more, but we don't know the kind of power Jody really had over that situation. And there were other people that worked with Jody who turned against her now, who said back then that she knew how to get children taken away from their fathers. She knew how to, make it so fathers lost any right to see the children at all, ever again. She knew how to do that. So I'm not giving Jody a pass at all. She is a nasty, nasty piece of work. She really is. She is manipulative, she is controlling, and she is evil. But the same can be said about Ruby. The thing with Jody is, I think that she wanted Ruby all to herself. Meaning, not only did she need to get rid of Kevin, but she had to get rid of the kids. She got rid of Chad, she got rid of Sherry, just got them to move out, but she had to get rid of the other kids in some way also. But she couldn't let them go live with Kevin. That wasn't the way to do it. Jody has a rage against men. It's very bizarre. And, I hate men a lot of the time too, but not to that point. And never my husband. And she was a money-hungry scam artist too. She knew how to turn connections into a money-making machine without actually ever really saving or helping anyone. The show covers how they got Kevin on board with their line of thinking, which seemed to take a lot of work, but they did it. They had to win Kevin over. Treat him like a good guy. Treat him like he's the most righteous man around. Use him as the example of how men should be. Praising him, making him feel good about, who he is as a man, and then turn on him. Totally turn on him. Jody wanted power and money and strong influence and control. That's what she wanted. The thing about calling themselves moms of truth, Jody's children want nothing to do with her. What kind of parenting skills can she teach someone else when her own children don't want anything to do with her? She failed as a parent. Kevin talks about Jody saying that she was haunted by shadow figures and Satan was out to get her, and they believed it. They bought this. I believe Jody completely manipulated that entire situation and created the manifestations of evil, like the flying plates and stuff, using common stage tricks to fool the Frankies so she could get further manipulate that family. I guess Ruby thought that Jody was God's vessel. If she was a vessel of anything biblical, it was Satan. I don't really believe any of that, but I'm just saying she was not God's vessel. Again, I'm still on the fence about all the religious stuff, but I also respect everyone's right to believe what they believe as long as they're not hurting other people, especially children. But yeah, Ruby believed Jody was chosen by God. Jody was chosen by a lack of medication. That's what she was chosen by. Chad also talks about how Jody moved into the Franke home. Sherry had to move out of her room so Jody can have her room, but she was going to college soon, so she didn't really care. And I believe that when Sherry went to college, that was almost the end of it. She was almost done with her relationship with her mother, or at least it was, the beginning of the end. She went home for that Christmas, and she said that was weird for her. She went into her old room where Jody was staying, which was now Jody's room, to get something, and said that she saw candles and massage oils on the nightstand, and she felt that was very weird. And Chad also talks about how basically he wasn't the issue anymore now that Jody was living there. And which kind of breaks my heart that he was led to believe he was ever an issue. Like I said before, there was nothing wrong with him. He didn't need to be fixed. As near as I can tell, he was just a normal teenager that was treated badly by people who have no idea what a teenager is supposed to be, and people who don't know how to parent. Yes, teenagers should be disciplined, but he wasn't out doing drugs. He wasn't out drag racing and getting girls pregnant. He wasn't doing those things. He was a little mischievous because he hated the family vlogs. He didn't deserve to lose a bed for 7 months. He didn't deserve to be beaten bloody, which is what Sherry says happened. She says that happened to him, and he doesn't deserve to feel like he ever was a problem. But now the focus is on the two youngest Franke children and their disrespect and their problematic behavior. Oh, my word. Because heaven forbid that they should act like children. So this Christmas that Sherry went home for, that Sherry talks about, was the one that the two youngest children didn't get anything for Christmas. Now, isn't that so sad? And it's not about getting things. It's not about getting materials. It's about leaving them out. So there's a clip of Jody where she says children are not entitled to privacy. And that just upset me. They absolutely are entitled to privacy. Everyone is entitled to privacy, whether they're an adult or a child. They aren't entitled to hide and keep bad secrets, but they are entitled to privacy. They are entitled to privacy when they go to the bathroom, when they shower or bathe, when they change their clothes, or when they just want some time to be alone. They are entitled to privacy. They're entitled to keep a journal, whatever. They're entitled to privacy. So Sherry talks about looking into Jody. She starts looking her up on the internet, just simply Googling her. And Sherry, thinking it was weird that a therapist would move in with her patients, decided to, look into her and discovered Jody's kids didn't talk to her. She found out that her license was revoked for 18 months in the past, and she's not really a psychologist. She read online that Jody destroyed families. She found out a lot of information about Jody, and she went to Ruby with this information, and Ruby just didn't care. That wasn't an issue of concern. It wasn't important for her at all. Sherry was the smartest one in the bunch. The oldest Franke child was the one that figured out that this woman, Jody, was nothing but a lie. And Kevin talked about when Jody moved into their house, how she would go into these possessed trances. I'm going to just say this. I believe with my whole heart that was all an act. It's performative. Manipulative people are very performative. These little episodes were not the devil, was not a possession. It was a performance to fool people that she has already gained some type of mental control over. And this is also when in the men's group meetings where Jody started to turn on Kevin when she was living in his house, because she wanted to get rid of Kevin. She had it good with Ruby. She was living under her roof. She wanted Ruby all to herself. Ruby was sleeping in the bed with her, in their house, as she was, winning Ruby over. And she had to win her completely over. And that meant they needed to cast Kevin out. Because, Kevin was a man. And he was a problem. Because men are a problem in Jody's world. Men are bad. This is when it comes out that Sherry believed Jody and Ruby were having a romantic relationship. I think pretty much everyone believes that. Whatever the relationship was, it was more than therapist/patient, more than a friendship or sisterhood. Kevin described Ruby and Jody's relationship as uncomfortably intimate. Jody also isolated Ruby from the rest of her family as well, her parents and her siblings, and emotionally isolated from her children that were present in the house. Kevin and Chad both described when they were forced out of the house. It was sad. It was very sad. This is what people like Jody do. They isolate. Isolate. Chad had to go because he was pretty much an adult male, and she can't have adult men around. And Chad and Kevin had to be put out. And Kevin talked about the smirk on Ruby's face as she took photographs while her children said goodbye to their father, who after this day, they didn't see him again for over a year. So Jody was successfully isolated Ruby, had successfully isolated Ruby and the younger children. And Ruby seemed deviously, devilishly happy about it. Sherry went to the house after her mother basically cut her off from the family, and Ruby told her that, basically that she was a danger to the family and not part of the family anymore. And this upset Sherry very much, but Ruby was stone cold, dry eyes. She didn't care at all. So the isolation was successful, and these 4 younger children are stuck with 2 evil women with warped beliefs, with a warped relationship. And in the 3rd episode, Kevin and Chad are gone. They're out of the house, and Sherry has been disowned for no reason other than looking into Jody and finding out Jody is crap. So the 4 youngest children are now alone with Ruby and Jody, 2 maliciously manipulative evil women. Neighbors say that the children once seemed very happy, joyful, playful, now appear to be withdrawn, without any joy, no smiles. Their father has been sent away. Their 2 oldest siblings have been sent away. So many changes in their life so quickly. I don't know what changes happen in the house right away to make the children seem withdrawn, to the point that the neighbors can notice. But something happened. Probably a lot of somethings happened. They weren't happy. They were going in a different direction that they didn't want to go, and it was all because of a selfish woman. And half their family was gone. Their father, their oldest brother, their oldest sister. All because of a selfish woman and her selfish friend. So the interviewer asked Kevin, why didn't he stand up and say enough? And Kevin said that he doesn't know, and it eats him alive when he thinks about it. And maybe it should. I mean, we can judge him all we want and say he should have said something, he should have done more to see his kids, he should have done something, he could have been there, he should have manned up. It was his house after all. But not being in that situation, we can't fully understand what it was like to be in his shoes with someone like Jody around. He always went along with her mistreatment, Ruby's mistreatment of the children, always, even when he was in the house. And that is a problem, because he always cowered to her. So I agree, he could have manned up a little bit. But I'm just saying, I don't think it would have been very easy for him with Jody being the force that she was, being the person that she is. A DCF worker that communicated with one of the Franke neighbors said that they were worried about the kids, but that they had to close the case because there was no reported known abuse. No one said the children were being harmed. So, well, now we know that was untrue. Also, it seems the bulk of the mistreatment went to the 2 youngest children, and the 2 middle girls were fine. At least that's what it seems like. They weren't getting any kind of, mistreatment, seemingly. I wonder if the 2 middle children even know what was happening. Well, they probably know now, but I wonder if they knew at the time what was happening and thought it was normal. That's something we may never know, but I do wonder. I do. I have a lot of wonderings when it comes to this situation. Those poor kids, I hope they're going through some serious deprogramming. I really do. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're getting the best treatment, but so Kevin talks about the phone call from Ruby when she knew she was going to get arrested, and the manipulation was real. She told him this was his chance to redeem himself, although it's never clear what he needs to redeem himself for, And to me, that's just so disgusting. It's so manipulative. This man was beat down, emotionally tormented, and dismissed and separated from his family until he was needed. She was trying to manipulate this man who was already in a weakened state. And at the same time, we still have to look at him and be like, maybe you were in a weak state, but you aren't a child. Your children needed you. There were 4 children that needed him, especially the 2 youngest. And I feel like he had to go through some, again, reprogramming before he could step back and see how incredibly wrong this all is. I know people have their opinions of Kevin, but I want to believe that he's trying now. I want to believe that he sees where he was wrong and is trying to grow and learn from that. I don't know if he's got the children back or not, but all of them are going to need treatment for this. All of them. These 6 children, even Chad and Sherry, who are adults now, they need a parent figure. You know, and that's going to have to be Kevin, because it ain't going to be Ruby for the 30 years, and probably never. This episode details Ruby and Jody's arrest. Ruby is stone silent when she's arrested. It's weird. Why doesn't she just say right off the bat that she wants her attorney? She doesn't. She just sits there and does the slow blinking. She's so awkward. And Jody is a little different in the interview room. She's talking, but she's not saying anything. She's not about what she's been arrested for. She's trying to manipulate the police officers like she's gotten through life manipulating everybody. She's trying to align herself with the police, saying things like, I'm like you, I'm a psychologist, I talk to people and try to get the truth out. Usually I'm on the other side of the table. Of course, that's not verbatim, but that's what she was basically saying. You know, basically what she was trying to say. She's so manipulative. And the officer being interviewed points that out. They knew that she was trying to manipulate the situation. Both Ruby and Jody were charged with 6 counts of CA each. Chad talks about when he found out. He was at work and his boss went over to him to offer support, but he had no idea what was going on. So he looked his mom up and found out, you know, looked up Franke. He didn't believe it was real. He said he really, really believed this was the end of days and that Jody and Ruby were God's instruments, God's chosen. He knows better now, of course, but like I said earlier, he probably had to go through that, you know, some deprogramming, you know. An officer talks about interviewing the youngest children and how the 12-year-old boy was very open. He was very open. He told about being, you know, forced to stand in the sun for hours, being tied down, forced to do strenuous exercise all day long, you know, being forced to run in the desert. The police went back in the house to, you know, search for evidence when they find Ruby's journal that tells them everything. The journal says everything. This young boy escaping Jody's house and going to the neighbors, you know, for help. This saved his life and his little sister's life. These 2 children would have died. I believe that they would have died if the boy didn't get away when he did. Ruby really thought she was righteous in her actions against her children. She really thought she was righteous. But I also believe that she got off on it. I think she got some kind of charge out of it. Because earlier we hear about her beating Chad bloody. That wasn't acts of righteousness. She did it because she liked it. It made her feel good. She liked the powerful feeling. God was her excuse for this disgusting behavior and, and diabolical treatment. And I say, don't put this on God. You did this, lady. You did this to your children. As if God is supposed to make it excusable. Kevin at first does stand by Ruby, but it doesn't take him too long to realize that this was all wrong. He's been deceived, lied to, played with, brainwashed, manipulated, and he knows that now. He told Chad they've been lied to this whole time, and he finally starts to understand that has all been a lie, all of it. Kevin said little by little he started accepting the idea that Jody and Ruby did something awful. He says that he feels angry and guilty. Again, I know that we all feel negatively towards Kevin, or a lot of us do. But from what I see, he knows he was wrong, and he wants to be a kind, loving father to his children. He's lost so much time with them. And I'm sure that the family is, again, going through some kind of counseling. I'm sure of it. They need it for sure. Ruby destroyed her family. She destroyed these people. She destroyed 7 people. The destruction started before Jody, and when Jody came along, it just gave Ruby permission to be absolutely evil. It was amped up. Both women pleaded guilty to 4 counts of CA. 2 of the counts were dropped, and they are going to serve 4 to 30 years in prison. The sentence is up to 15 years per count to be served consecutively. Each count carries up to a 15-year sentence, which would be up to 60 years, but in Utah the maximum is 30 years, so they can only do 30 years in prison. Jody worked on Ruby, knowing that she already had a willing participant. One of the family friends said that Jody basically relished in taking revenge out on people who were happy. She wanted to go after people who were happy. Kevin expresses that he still loves Ruby, and I can understand that. Love doesn't just disappear. It doesn't. If it did, breakups would be a whole lot easier, but he'll be okay. He'll be okay. He has a second chance to be the parent his children truly need, the parent his children never had. His children will be dealing with this trauma. The youngest have the freshest trauma, but Chad and Sherry have a lot of trauma too, and they were traumatized as well. I don't know about the 2 children in the middle, but surely they have trauma too. I'm sure they've gone through it. They can't come out of this unscathed. Ruby gives the court an empty speech about how bad she feels, but I have a hard time believing it. Sherry doesn't believe it at all. She blames Jody indirectly, but she was a monster before Jody. Jody just helped her amp it up. Yeah. Sherry expresses that she will never speak to Ruby again, and she doesn't mince words. She doesn't care how sorry Ruby says she is, and I stand by Sherry. I support Sherry. Sherry deserves peace in her life that she never had under Ruby's roof. So many of us saw this coming. People saw it before Connections and Moms of Truth. And I feel like people don't want to be right when they suspect CA. They don't want to be right about this, but so often they are. Sherry is campaigning against family vlogging. I'm not opposed to couples vlogging, but I don't think children should be involved. I don't think children should be featured on channels. If they show up, I think they should be blurred. Not only does it expose them, it is unpaid work. It can also create a false sense of self and entitlement. Children are exposed to the public every time they leave their house. But parents have control when it comes to exposure on social media. Why not take that control? They should really embrace that power and protect their children as much as they possibly can. There's no reason to put them in family vlogs. Yeah, family vlogs are big money. They're a big business, but, you know, we can't police every second of their lives, but we should do what we can. Ruby didn't just film her children. She forced them to do family vlogging and berated and belittled and punished them when they didn't perform to her standards. And when she hooked up with Jody, it became a different kind of abuse. You know, the youngest Frankie boy literally saved his own life and the life of his little sister. I personally feel, after looking at all the case photos, these children were at death's door. They were at the end of their fight. I feel like this was so close to being a homicide case, a double homicide case. Hopefully the children are now thriving. I'm sure that wherever they are, they're better off than they were with her. They'll be in counseling for a long time, but they'll be a family again, hopefully, without Ruby. Hopefully Ruby and Jody will be in prison, you know, longer than the minimum, at least until all the children are adults. I have Sherry's book, by the way, and I'm just trying to find the time to sit down and read it, and then I'll discuss her book with you. But that's it for this video. Go to Hulu and check out the series, or Disney Plus. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to everyone later. Bye.